When is your birthday?
My birthday is October 9th. I was born 1956.
And that makes you
I'm
69?
69. Yeah, I'll be 70 in October. So
And how many of those years have you spent as a climber?
I started climbing in 1974. I took a math class, and for the Christmas party for the math class, the teacher showed us slides of Yosemite and told about this great climber, Royal Robbins, and just I was amazed. I had been backpacking, since I was 13, and just loved the outdoors and the mountains especially, and just I'm antisocial, so I love getting away from people out into the wild. So it began, and I had a lot of trouble meeting partners. I took a class at the university and met a couple of guys that worked at the outdoor stores in Albuquerque, and got to know them a little bit over the years. But mostly my start was just going out by myself and bouldering in my hiking boots and getting used to the rock. And, then, of course, rock shoes back then were abysmal. But I did get a pair of Royal Robbins shoes, and that greatly improved my climbing ability.
Yeah, it seems like back then climbing is still considered a fringe sport, but back then it truly was. Talk to me about like what that was like. Like, you had trouble meeting partners. I feel like people still complain about that today. I would imagine the landscape of partners and people who are even climbing in the first place are so far and few between. What was it like that? There's no partner finder on Mountain Project. There's no Facebook groups. Like, how do you meet partners? How do you meet mentors? Like, how did you, like you said, you kind of like had to throw yourself at the sport, but like, yeah, what was that process like of almost introducing yourself to it?
The thing about climbing is if you have a partner, you have to be able to trust them. And and when you're new and you're not real outgoing, developing that trust from someone else is a hurdle. So, I just kept bouldering and going and hanging out in the outdoor stores and talking to these guys. And I finally got invited on a trip to the Wind Rivers with 3 other guys. And we rented a car and we drove up to Dickinson Park in this rental Chevy Nova, and hiked into Cirque of the Towers. And that was one of my first exposures with having real partners, backpacking in, carrying heavy packs and camping with 4 guys for a week. And so that breaks the bond right there. But getting to that point was a little tough. And like I said, I think I had gone climbing with one of the fellows in the Sandias. He was looking for a belayer on this new route he was doing in the Sandias. And I said, well, I can belay. And so, and that was back in the aid days. And so we went up 2 pitches and slept in hammocks. And then he said, well, you want to lead the next pitch? And I said, well, I know how to swing a hammer. So I let up a ways and got up about 40 feet and pounded a bugaboo in under this horizontal crack and stood up on it, and then noticed it was underneath a loose, probably 400-pound block. And so that was my first experience in getting scared. So I quickly backed down and down-aided back to the belay, and we went home. But that was my first real experience with a partner before we went to the Wind Rivers. And so then through that experience, he invited me to go on this other trip.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, it's like I would imagine too, like nowadays you can kind of like burn a relationship a little bit by not having being safety focused or, XYZ, whatever these kind of cardinal sins are that we have as climbers when we're looking for new partners. But imagine back then, like once you burned the bridge, it was almost kind of over, right? Like the pool of people are so small that if you get labeled as a dangerous climber or labeled as someone that the community doesn't want to really climb with, you're going to be on your own. Did that kind of like pressure weigh on you at all?
Um, yeah, I mean, there were probably all of 8 climbers in all of Albuquerque, and
8?
eight,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and then maybe 2 or 3 old timers who were, climbing back in the '60s and
Yeah.
had pretty much gotten out of it. Um, so yeah, I'm not too particular who my partners are because I don't like to fall. So if I have somebody that's a little iffy, I'll just really focus on either doing something that's not real hard or just, not falling. Because I've only had a few partners that were pretty sketchy, and spent 4 days with one of them down in the stronghold, and he was smoking weed at 8 o'clock in the morning and all day long. And I'm like, yeah, I better not fall with this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I've had really good partners over the years, really, really trustworthy, committed partners. And that's been great.
It seems like in our meet and greet, you had said that you've been climbing for so long that the partners that you climb with, while you have these like periods of good climbing partners, but then eventually they either stop climbing or they end up going another direction. What has that process been like?
I've stayed in touch with most of my old partners. The trip to the Wind Rivers, that first trip to the Wind Rivers, one of the guys I didn't know was a fellow named Dave Darling, and he was a couple years younger than I was. And Dave Darling, aka the Hulk.
Was he a big dude?
He wasn't at that time. I think I was 18 or 19 and he was 16 or 17, but I developed a good relationship with him. And then we were both very new climbers. The other 2 guys were much more experienced. And so we ended up climbing together for several years. And then he ended up going in the Air Force and was there for 2 years. And when he came back, then he was big. He was a big guy when he came back. And we continued to climb. That's probably one of my best partners. I've been climbing. I climbed with him for 20 plus years until he started getting arthritis. But while I was in the Air Force, I met another group of climbers, Paul Horak, Mark Dalen, Mark Leonard, and they were all, gung-ho and really trustworthy guys. And Paul and I climbed and Mark too, climbed for quite some time while the Hulk was in the Air Force, and then continued to. And that's Paul Horak is who I did El Cap with the first time. So, I went through those partnerships. Paul ended up moving away to New Hampshire. Mark Leonard was a big time skier, so he was not real available during the winter. And so those relationships kind of dissolved, and I moved to a couple of others that, were local guys in town. Those, I did a few climbs with them, but that's about the time I got into hang gliding. My rock climbing kind of dropped off. I'd still get out several times a year, but nothing, not every weekend like I'd been doing.
How important is the partnership to the climbing experience to you?
when you have a good partner, it's very important. The climbing experience for me is always the top, but if you can share that with a partner, it's twice as good. It being able to share the experience with someone else is one of the best things you can do.
I would imagine that the type of partner you have also influences the experience that you have personally at the same time, right? Like if you have a partner you don't fully trust, that's going to affect your experience in the mountains. If you have a partner that necessarily maybe isn't as efficient as you or doesn't have the same risk tolerance as you, it's going to ultimately affect how you have an experience in the mountains. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of like, for me, like partnerships is so important. I feel like it's almost a direct connection to like what my experience is going to be like in the mountains. Sure, I might be able to lead the pitch and like, man, that was great. But if I was like subtly, unconsciously, maybe this guy won't catch me, or like, whatever it ended up might being, like the partnership to me ends up being like probably the most important part of like the experience. And I have a lot of people that struggle with that kind of like partnership side of it. And so I feel like there's a lot of like lead rope soloing that's coming out now, like people who are just like, fuck it, like I don't have a good group of people. I can't really trust anybody, or I haven't, been able to spend the time to network. So I'm just going to take up lead rope soloing to have my own experience. And I think that's, to each his own. I'm glad everybody's climbing, but like that partnership where you like mesh and you have that vibe, it's just like, man, it's so good.
Yeah. Lead rope soloing is, to me, it's kind of sad. I mean, there's so much mechanics to it, and you're missing out on the joy of just climbing fast and while safely, is really a rush, it, so.
Yeah, we were, I've been workshopping this, like, the concept of the pillars of climbing. I think I shared that with you before. Performance, adventure, relationships. And, we're kind of talking about this right now, but one of the things you added to that list, which I thought was kind of insightful, was stories. You had said stories were another pillar for you in climbing. And just the value of collecting and sharing these stories over time. So I guess, like, to you, like, what makes a story worth telling?
It, well, it has to be an experience that was memorable. I've done lots of climbs that I can remember very little about them, but there's a few that, something happened, or your partner said something, or took a fall, or something made that memorable. The weather was just perfect that day, or you were just climbing like you'd never climbed before, something that makes them memorable. I think we're unique as humans in that we do have memories. Perhaps animals have memories. We don't know about them. But memories are very important to me, in doing things that develop those memories.
One of my goals when I grow older is to not be an individual who lives in regret. How would you, I'm kind of, I guess, leading this question in kind of with memories, but like, I would imagine that building a life of memories is one way to avoid that. Things that you can look back on and feel pride or joy. And yeah, it takes a certain level of intensity of life to like build those kind of memories.
Yeah, it does. I remember a quote I heard years and years ago, that everyone should write their own autobiography when they're 40. So reevaluating their life up to that point in time, and if there's nothing to tell, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's good advice. I might even say like when you're 30 to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like some astrological science, air quotes, Just saying like there's 30 is a pivotal year. It's where Jupiter goes around the sun every 30 years. And so when Jupiter hits that 30-year mark again, it's like this reset. It's supposed to be like, okay, analyze your life. What have you done? Have you lived a good life? Or have you been kind of like self-serving or whatever? You're not on your path. And if that happens to you and you're not on your path, usually some sort of catastrophic event in your life happens that is meant to be served as a reset, to reset your life, to recalibrate, to try to get you to build another foundation. And the funniest thing about my life is that my climbing accident happened when I was like 30-ish. And so it's like the universe or God or whatever was just like, you need to reevaluate. Like, here's a crazy catastrophic event. Like, time to think about your life. But yeah, I think that it's important to have that kind of self-reflection for sure. And yeah, if you can't, they say there's a phrase that said novelty is the cure to time passing quickly. The more novel experiences we can acquire in our lives, the more time slows down, and the more we feel like we've lived. And that's one thing I really love about climbing is that every experience we have in the mountains is novel. Every route we choose is new in some way. And so it's like, it's a way to directly inject novelty into our lives, like over and over again, every time we choose to go out to the mountains.
Yeah. And even when you do a route again, a second time, there's always new things you discover about it, and, yeah. And novelty is, your phrase, I don't remember what you said, but, I translated it to one that I know it changes as good as a holiday. And so, so anytime you change a routine, you introduce novelty, and that's always joyful.
One thing I've been thinking about recently as I get older is humans' tendencies to resist change, to identify yourself with certain patterns or behaviors, and then that just becomes who you are. How have you dealt with that as you've matured and grown, balancing the difference between like being plastic enough to adapt and to change to the world or yourself as you're growing older versus building these narratives around yourself and living in them for extended periods of time? Because it seems like you just alluded to the fact that you have kind of like seen that and chosen to stay in a more adaptive state.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I kind of go through phases of my primary sport. Climbing has always been number one, but as I mentioned, I started hang gliding. I did that for about 8 years, and then after that, the kids came along, and then I got into road racing and cycling, and did that for another 8 years. And after that, it was CrossFit, and now it's back to climbing again. So, yeah, that change, every time you come back to something, it's always fresh again. And I've gone back and done a lot of the routes I did when I was in my 20s, and just repeating them in my 60s, and that's been it's been a real joy, just because they're all fresh again, and wow, I can still do them.
Yeah. Do you feel like impactful stories have a bias towards like success or failure?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Um, in my 20s, a lot of it was failure. In fact, the group I was mostly climbing with, one of them referred to us as the Rabo, or the Rio Riba back off school of mountaineering. That we'd attempt a lot of climbs and just it's not into this, wrap off, and but they were memorable too, and at some point you have to get past that. You have to push yourself a little more and say, I we really didn't give it everything we had on that. And so I think failures do help reach success. You know, the whole thing of getting back on the horse, and you can't wallow in failure. You got to decide what you did wrong and then get back in it.
So ultimately, success is a culmination of multiple failures.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to learn, because if you don't fail, are you trying stuff that's hard enough? And if you try stuff that's too hard, it's demoralizing, and you got to use some judgment there of what the progression should look like.
Yeah. So the funny thing about climbing is, obviously, fail to the top is an easy phrase to say. And I think that it could work in lower stakes environment, but with climbing, failure can mean death or permanent injury sometimes. I would say, especially back in the day when you had hexes or pitons, or the lack of technological advancements that we have today that makes climbing so safe. How do you push the boundaries back then how do you push boundaries and fail while still being able to like come back and try again? Because you can fail and never have a chance to prove yourself again.
Yeah, the failures I experienced didn't have to do with injuries or life or death experiences. Really, they were more about lack of motivation, and just getting in over your head, and realizing it early enough that you don't push yourself into the situation where things get really bad.
Yeah. You had deemed yourself, you had said that you were considered the wild one.
I think someone else said that.
Someone else said that? Well, I have it in quotes here from our meet and greet, so
whether I was probably quoting someone
whether
else.
it was from you or somebody else, I've got it written down here. I guess I'm curious, on this topic of stories. Give me a story that kind of paints the picture of why you were given that kind of archetype.
Mainly probably from a reputation of runouts and soloing. In fact, just over Thanksgiving, I found out that one of my people I've climbed with in the past referred to me as Crazy Dave. So
You just found this out?
I just found that out. Peter Brandoni's daughter actually said, "Oh, that's Crazy Dave." But she didn't say that to me. She told a high school friend of hers who happens to be married to my son. So I hear it third hand. But yeah, because I started climbing with hexes and stoppers, which didn't fit in a lot of places, a lot of that led to forced runouts, And so I just got used to it. And then the friend I mentioned, Mark Leonard, who I climbed with back in my 20s, he was a phenomenal face climber, and we did several serious runout routes together, and we just clicked, in that kind of environment. We ended up in the Brazos, which are the northern New Mexico. It's the largest walls in the state, about 1,800 foot. They're pretty low angle, but huge faces. And we ended up doing a couple of free solo first ascents there.
On-site free solo first ascents?
On-site free solo first ascents.
That's the purest expression of the sport right there.
Yeah. So, it's something that you do when you're feeling really on the top of your game, and you're with someone you can trust. We I carried a 10 hex on my harness. We wore harnesses, and I carried a 10 hex, and he carried an 8 hex. And we figured if we got in trouble, we could throw him in and maybe hang out until someone we either recovered or someone came to rescue us.
No ropes, no backup ropes?
No, no. And yeah, those were super memorable trips. But yeah, probably, I'm not known for technical strength, and I've known for being able to hang on a long time, and I'm known for being able to do runouts. And so that's no doubt.
How much of that, like, so the psychological aspect of climbing, the runouts, the performance over, no fall terrain, how much of that was just a byproduct of the lack of technology versus, and like, it was almost like if you wanted to be a climber and you wanted to climb, certain routes, it was just a part of it? Or like, did most people in the climbing space kind of like have to adapt this kind of boulder mentality to be a climber? Or were there still ways that you could mitigate that? And ultimately, like, was being a bold climber a choice back then, or was it a requirement to be a climber?
It was a requirement. And a lot of people, because of that, a lot of people would get into climbing, they'd last a couple of years, and then they'd quit because they just couldn't get over that hurdle. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult because it's all a matter of judging risk. And I know your interview with the two that did the Goliath, it was all about judging risk, right, on that interview. And my level of risk is, if I'm going to solo something, it has to be at least 2 grades below my top end, So it's got to be pretty comfortable and it not very sustained. It's got to be, major rests at points and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, the risk, being able to judge risk and knowing when to back off is actually imperative. And some people just don't have it. They'll just push the risk too hard and have real epics, or they back out and quit.
Yeah. How do you think about, so at least for me, like yesterday we were on Fiddler on the Roof. There's some serious runouts. The reason I feel so comfortable in that position is because I personally have enough connection with my body and my movement on rock to not feel like I'm going to come off. Like I'm not just like, oh my God, I feel like I might come off, like, but I'm still going. It's like, no, like I ultimately feel like I'm soloing. I feel like everything I'm doing is calculated and it's perfect. And like my movement is in control. I'm balanced. And so there's that level of connection internally to like my percentage of whether or not I'm going to come off the wall. I'm not that hard of a climber though. Like I can't climb higher than 512. And so what do you think the difference is between someone who might be a 513, 514 sport climber, but then can't handle a route like yesterday? Where's the disconnect there? Like, what is the difference between the two climbers? Because I would imagine that someone who is so technically proficient on hard climbs would think that that was a cakewalk. But there's definitely certain people that have a disconnect to that psychological risk aspect of the climb.
Yeah, I think people are looking for different things. An NFL player is probably not going to want to play tennis. So you have sports celebrities that play tennis, and you have sports celebrities that play NFL.
So you're comparing like a psychological climbing versus hard sport climbing as almost two separate sports.
I think they are, absolutely. Yeah, sport climbing. When sport climbing came out, I looked at it as these are engineered climbs. as opposed to artistic climbs. So trad climbing, back in the day, it was all ground up. So you'd walk to the base, you'd look up, you'd pick out a line, and you'd try to run it. And sport climbing comes out, and they go to the top of the rock, and they rappel down, place bolts. It's all about, the focus there is on safety and technical ability, whereas the focus on trad climbing is more aimed for, I think trad climbs are much more beautiful to do than sport climbs. And I kind of put sport climbing in the category of bouldering, where it develops, a lot of power, low risk, and just high technical ability. Whereas, I'm trying to transition to sport climbing more at my age because, a big fall could really mess me up. But it's been difficult.
This show is brought to you by LIVSN Designs. LIVSN comes from the Swedish word livsnjutare, which literally means one who lives life fully. Living life fully for us means alpine starts, long days, and tough conditions that test our gear. LIVSN rises to meet that standard so that you can focus on the experience and not your clothes. Their clothing is functional, versatile, and durable, purpose-built for life in the outdoors, with a goal to inspire us to invest more in quality products so that we can own less and live more. They make the clothes that you can wear all day, every day. Whether you're at the crag, high up on a wall, on a date, or at work, LIVSN is there for the entire lifestyle of the outdoor enthusiast. And they have an in-house repair program, so if they rip, tear, or fall apart in any way, you can send them in to LIVSN. You even get to decide whether your repair falls under warranty or wear and tear. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can buy it, try it, and if you still don't like it, they'll just give you your money back. Right now, you can get 15% off at LIVSN by going to the link in the description below and using code TCM15 at checkout. That's the link in the description below and code TCM15 at checkout. And remember, every dollar spent at LIVSN is a dollar spent supporting this podcast. Yeah. Yeah. So, on this topic, you started climbing during the transition where clean climbing started to enter the sport, and then you also witnessed a sport climbing boom, which ultimately, because of the risk off vibe from sport climbing, adopted more people. Because I would say in general, more people are risk off versus risk on. It's just a nature of humanity. And so as climbing becomes safer, more people can access the sport. What was that transition like in climbing for you? And ultimately, link it to New Mexican culture, climbing culture as well, because I think it's a lesser known area, lesser known topic. We've heard the story of bolting and sport climbing coming to the sport, but how has it been specific to you in your area that you came from?
Well, New Mexico, we don't have the amount of rock that, say, Arizona or Colorado have. And so our multi-pitch trad climbs are pretty focused on maybe 4 different areas in the state. But when sport climbing came in, there's a lot of, 200-foot or less crags in the state. And they're open in new areas all the time. So, I mentioned that when I started climbing, there were maybe 8 climbers in Albuquerque. Now there's probably in excess of 200, 300 climbers in Albuquerque.
Still not that much.
Not that much. I mean, compared to Boulder, there's probably 1,000 just in Boulder alone, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're a pretty low population state, but there's lines, at the classic climbs at the sport areas. They still, not many, but there's still some. But as far as the transition, when I started, most of my rack consisted of booty that I'd picked up, and that was one of the problems of finding partners. They're like, not climbing on your rack. But yeah, when I met Paul and some of the others, they had decent racks, and you know it. And that's when I got introduced to cams, because Paul he had gotten into the cams, and I'd always said, I'm going to let somebody else beta test those before I trust them.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, you watch people take falls on cams, and you go, yeah, okay, I'll start using them. And then there was a fair amount of controversy when the wrap bolting started in the state, especially at established trad climbing areas. There was some bolt chopping and criticism and so that really worked itself out, because people, the sport climbers would just start opening new crags where trad climbing wasn't established. But that's one of the things that irritates me the most is I did a trad climb down in the Cochise Stronghold, and it had one super run out pitch, a lot of boilerplate, easy, 30-foot run outs, maybe. But the one pitch, you just put in a piece and went for about 80 feet. and you got to the top and you're about 6 feet away from the bolt there. And of course, that's where you start to freak out. And it's another smeary slab move on real old granite that kind of grinds away under your feet. So that was one of the more terrifying situations that I've been in. But a fellow bolted a sport line right up the middle of that thing. And it's a classic now. Nobody does the trad line, everybody does the sport line. But I'm looking over, at a line of bolts 10 feet from me and going, what the heck? There's tons of rock here. Why here? So I think that's really something, for the climbers that are doing new routes to keep in mind is you don't need to ruin an established trad line to put in something you think is going to be safer. And that's a lot of it, You get comments from the sport climbers, well, that's unsafe, It's not about safety. It's about climbing.
The whole point is it not safe. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's just about climbing, and if you're clipping bolts every 6 feet, that, it's just not going to be as enjoyable.
Yeah. So, like, does risk make climbing more meaningful to you?
It does, because it tests. I mean, there's physical tests, can you climb 13? Can you climb 14? What's the hardest move you can do? And then there's mental tests of, gee, I've got a lot of, like yesterday, I had a lot of anxiety heading up into that route, because I knew it was sustained, it was hard. And that mental aspect of working through anxiety and just getting it under control, I think, is a character building trait. Yeah.
How do you, to what I've been running into is I agree with you. Number one, I agree with you. I think that risk adds so much depth to the experience. And it also, for me, channels a deeper sense of flow state. a deeper sense of movement focus when I have more on the line. There's something about it. And I don't think it's really achievable unless you do have that element of risk to really feel that like that deep connection to the movement. I just got like so lost in fantasizing about that experience. I forgot where my train of thought was.
It, that movement is important because, when you're 15 feet out and you come to a hard section, you're going, I've got to get this perfect.
You got to get it perfect.
I've got to get it perfect. And just this mental focus, I got to think about the moves and nothing else. And you get through it, and then you get to easier stuff again, and you relax a little bit. But there's a total focus you have to have moving through a section when you're a ways out from the pro. And yeah, I think, that's a lot of that's missing in sport climbing. I have noticed these days that some of the bolters are starting to space the bolts out a little more, which I think is a good thing because, I don't know, there's probably over, 10 million bolts in the world now.
Yeah.
And being able to minimize those is a good thing because, I started in the days of nailing up routes, and pin scars became the big issue, and hence the movement to clean climbing because, it was just scarring the rock, and everybody got used to that, and it was, leave no trace climbing. And, you'd occasionally have to put in bolts for anchors, maybe in a blank face where you could drill from a stance, but the number of bolts in the world has grown exponentially, and I see no end to it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that progression. So actually my buddy and I just talked about this, and it seems that it's almost like there's this momentum towards safer climbing that is almost hard to stop. Like, how do you like the worst case scenario here is like you just talked about, rebolting psychological test piece, like the Backer Urian, like someone going up there and bolting that kind of climb. Because it's like, well, it's dangerous. Why would we want this? It's like, it almost comes down to a community consensus. And unless you have these people guarding these routes in a way and being like, no, this is the ethics, respect the ethics. Like, unless you have someone advocate, like doing that, there's a chance people are going to come through and change it as time grows. Like, part of your frustration, it seems, with like bolting is that there's that removal of that psychological aspect, like changing the way routes were established in the first place, or, putting up a sport line right next to a psychological test piece where it takes away from the experience. Like, how can we as a community, I don't know, protect those areas, or like, how do we fully communicate that to the generations as we progress? Because it almost seems like, as technology advances and as it reaches more and more people, there's going to be a bias towards safer climbing as time progresses, rather than it being the other way around.
Yeah, I think the push to safer climbing, a lot of it comes from the manufacturers.
Interesting.
Because
it sells more.
It sells more.
Wow.
You sell more bolts, you sell more hangers and anchors, and everybody's got to have the newest harness and the new lightest quick draws and the newest ropes, and so yeah, I think and the whole push to helmets. I never wore a helmet climbing except on ice climbs and El Cap.
I noticed you didn't wear a helmet yesterday. Justify that for me?
My vision is better. My peripheral vision. I don't I don't like things on my head, really.
Other than the hat?
Other than the hat, yeah, I did. That hides my gray hair and balding head, but but yeah, part of it was the Hulk back when we were both riding bikes, and back in that day, the Tour de France, nobody wore helmets. And then the manufacturers decided, gee, we can sell a lot of helmets if we convince everybody that, this is going to make you safer. I think, there are studies out there that when you wear a helmet, you take more risks, and because you think you're safer, So I know how to protect my head if I fall, and I took judo for 17 years, 13 years, and I know how to fall. I know how to keep my chin tucked, and I've never had a head injury until probably 5 years ago when my partner fell on me and the cam split my head open.
Oh. That didn't make you rethink it at all?
It did. It did. I bought a helmet after that, and I've worn it. I've worn it a couple times, but it's just even even the lightest helmets out there, they're still chin strap is irritating, or the things over your ear, and it's distracting from focusing on the moves.
I could see that if you're not used to it. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like I definitely think it's a big topic because like you see all these pictures of pro climbers and they're not wearing helmets, but then like there's anecdotal stories of them like climbing the route with a helmet and then going back down to the crux pitch, doing it for a photo, and then like, okay, take the helmet off, and then they climb it for the photo without a helmet on.
Really?
That's like a pretty standard thing that we do in the culture these days, because it looks better. It just, unfortunately, it does. You look harder. You look more in control. It's more aesthetic. Like for a picture, as a photographer, as a creator, it looks better. But
yeah, I agree.
But I would say in general, like in a sport that is inherently dangerous, like someone who wears a helmet versus someone who doesn't is by definition inherently safer. It's like, it's hard to argue against that, I would feel. And I think the biggest things that the helmet, at least for me, are like rock fall. Like, what if someone's above you and they drop a carabiner or they drop a cam or they kick a rock down? Like, we climb really busy routes. There's always people above, or, maybe you're climbing in a chossy area. Like, that would just suck to be like climbing and then all of a sudden it's just like, you should get hit by a rock and that's it. It's over, or like, you climbing and you somehow make a mistake and your foot's behind your rope and you flip upside down and you crack the back of your head against the wall.
That is a risk.
That's lights out. And so, yeah, I think like for me as a modern day climber, I grew up with the pressure of helmets. And so it's like, for me, I wear a helmet when I trad climb, multi-pitch trad climb. When I sport climb, then it starts to become a questionable. I'm like, it's like an established crag. There's no overhead hazard. There's no one going to be there. I'll just make sure I don't backstep the rope, and we'll have a fine day. Like, I'm not worried about that. But yeah, it's a topic of controversy. And I think the biggest thing, like I said, is with media. It's like, it's very rare to find a professional climber climbing with a helmet on like a magazine or a Instagram video. There are some, but I would say majority of the people who are glorified don't wear them.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly soloing. You would.
Yeah. At that point, yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's a preference, but I've just gotten used to being able to see. But you're right. I mean, rock fall is a big danger. Just a golf ball sized rock falling a couple of 100 feet can do a lot of damage. But then again, if it's a 50-pounder, a helmet's not going to
save you. Yeah,
not going to do you any good. And I remember one instance. I was on a climb. I was the third on the rope, and the woman in front of me knocked this I don't know, probably soccer ball size rock down. I was in the middle of a dihedral coming up, and I see this thing coming, and it's just bouncing off this side of the dihedral and this side, and I'm doing this. And I just dive out of the way at the last second, and the thing goes right by me. And, you know, that's the only real instance of rock fall that I've come close to being hurt from. And I think, you know, would a helmet have saved me? It might have kept me from serious head injury, you know, if it didn't kill me. But yeah, I did. I think when I was first climbing, we did an off-width chimney route, and it was back in the day, you know, I had no tube chocks. It was bigger than that, and got up halfway, and I was wearing a helmet then because I don't know why I was wearing a helmet, but I had a helmet that day. I took it off and I crammed it in the crack and clipped into it and kept climbing.
You use it as pro?
I used it as pro, and it was, you know, it was flimsy fiberglass thing. It would have crushed, but so it's basically an unprotected off-width. But it gave me psychological security.
What so you know, helmets, cams, gree-grees, different belaying techniques, different rappelling techniques. The the sport of climbing evolves over time. How have you both accepted and resisted these kind of like gear advancements, technological advancements, system advancements, battling that process of like, this works for me and this is how I've done it, versus like, this could be better? Like, where has that tension and where has that process lied for you?
I've always been conservative about the new technologies. You know, let other people beta test it, because you know the manufacturers which have come out with, you know, stellar new technologies, they always want to sell new gear. So, you know, this whole business of the ropes getting smaller and smaller and thinner is, you know, I wonder how much of that's marketing and how much, you know, there's no doubt climbing on an 8.8 is going to help you send that 513, you know, but out in the, you know, trad climbing, multi-pitch stuff, I've had friends that have cut their ropes and, you know, it didn't break completely, but it definitely freaked them out. And the smaller the rope, the more strength is in the sheath and the less strength is in the core. And so you cut that sheath, you could be in serious trouble. And, you know, it's, like I say, sport climbs, yeah, no problem. But yeah, I have to evaluate new technologies and decide where they come into it.
Mm-hmm. How have you thought about the introduction to assisted braking devices, gree-grees, jewels, all these different belay devices that have assisted braking?
They've required that in our gym in Albuquerque, and I really hate them because because I short rope my partner all the time. You either give them a big candy cane and let them take a big one, or you short rope them. And I don't want to get into the habit of giving a lot of slack out, you know, so they can make a quick clip, because you get into trad climbing and you do that and your partner hits the ledge, you know. And so habits are a big thing with me. You know, you got to develop the safe habits and get them ingrained. And so, yeah, I prefer the ATC. You can wrap with it. You can double rope, you know, belay. And I have started using a gree in the gym just out of, well, it's not, you know, there's auto locking non-gree stuff, but and I started with those, but for, I've been, like I said, I've been doing more and more sport climbing, trying to transition to it. And my partner's hanging the rope a lot. So Grigri's really nice. So, and you don't have to worry about wrapping with it and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, I see the argument where it's like, look, I've been using this device for 20 years, X amount of years, and I'm a master of this device. I know how to use it. I know how to give you the proper amount of slack. I know how to hold hold the rope down and make sure I catch your fall. Like, I've been doing this for so long, it's just second nature to me. And now you're, bringing in this new thing. I might have to learn a new technique, and it's going to be clunky and it's going to be unfamiliar to me. And so it's like, this is like, why even reintroduce it in the first place? And I think that for me, like, one of the things, like when I climb with a new partner, um, unless I'm in a situation where I'm with someone like yourself who has been like so ingrained where I, feel trusting to use an ATC, is just like, without that trust, there is this looming question in the back of your mind. It's just like, um, you never know, you never know. And it's like, all it would take is the person to be hands-free when you fell at the wrong time for that whole system to start slipping and sliding. And it's like really hard to recapture that. Or let's say I kick a rock down and knock my belayer unconscious. Now I'm free soloing. There's all these weird fringe circumstances that would basically render an ATC useless, where like an assisted braking device, like if those things happened, if my belayer wasn't paying attention, if for some reason my belayer decided to start smoking weed while I was leading, if I kick a rock down and make my belayer unconscious, like at least I'm still on belay. And then if I fell, like I'm not going to fall to my death. And so that's where I think the assisted braking devices come in as useful to a larger group of population that might not be as skilled with certain devices, because it takes time to learn the consequences and the skills and the techniques. Like back then it was a requirement for you. And so it was just like, this is how we do it. And now it's like motorized. It's so controlled. But I think again, with like this whole progression of climbing and people coming into the sport, it leaves less room for error, less room for chance.
yeah. And a lot of it is what you learn on. If you learn on an auto braking device or a gree, after 2 or 3 years, you're in the habit, you're pretty comfortable with it. You can pay out slack fairly quickly. So yeah, I don't have issues with them. It's just personal preferences. I think an ATC is just about as fast as you can get. And I was so old school that I just got introduced to guide mode 10 years ago or so.
How are you top belaying?
Just off the harness.
Oh, like redirected through the anchor?
If that, yeah, a lot of times just not even
straight
redirect.
down?
Yeah.
You're just clipped indirect, so you're
Yeah.
like to your hard point, and you just like belay down,
Yeah.
and you had lock from the belay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd redirect, a fair amount, but a lot of times you're sitting on a ledge and you're redirecting, and it's at least you can kind of hang off the ledge, and the rope's not scraping on the lip.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah, it's guide mode is nice until you need to pay out slack. So
Yeah, I mean the ATC I have, the pivot, the DMM pivot, the clip that you clip to the top of the anchor is hinged, and so you can just like even if it's fully loaded, there's movement in the back, and so you can just take your hand and open it, and it slips, and you can give slack out. Whereas the old ATCs, you'd have to like clip a carabiner to the front loophole and then like mechanically crank it open, and it would like slip really aggressively. So yeah, it's cool. There are certain ATCs that have like that feature built in. But as you saw for me, micro tracks all day.
yeah,
That's my
that
build.
worked really well.
Yeah, it's so nice, and it's also like since it has a pulley, it's like 2 fingers. It's just like just pulling the slack, just like eating food, drinking a snack. It's like it's all auto locking. It's really, really choice. There are some like I said before when I was telling you I was going to belay you, it's like, okay, no slack, because if there's a big loop of slack and you take a whip on a microtrax, like you could desheath the rope, like there are some risks involved. It's just a matter of being aware of those and mitigating them and making sure it's just tight, which you should be doing anyway as a belayer.
After 50 years, I can still learn things about climbing.
On that note, so like, we talked about present day reflecting on the past. I think you and I joked about this a little bit yesterday, but present day joking about the future. And, like right now we're talking about like, oh, ATCs or hit belays or, hexes. Like the typical comment I get on my Instagram is like, I climbed that route with hexes back in the day. And like, I can't do anything but imagine that is just like a symptom of life, and that I'm going to end up being that person in the future, commenting on some 20-year-old climber when I'm, 69 and being like, I used to climb back in the day when there were cams. Like now you're using this atomizer or whatever, where you just like mold, there's no need for any pro anymore at all. And climbing has just become completely sanitized and there's no risk involved anymore. Do you see that as like an inevitable progression of the sport and kind of like where we're going, unfortunately?
Yeah, I can see in my lifetime still some kind of like Spider-Man glue, and spider webs that you just spray on the rock and clip to them, and your partner comes up and
undoes it somehow,
and it just comes off and leaves no trace. Can you imagine what kind of possibilities that kind of technology would open up for ground up climbing? You could just head up and use as much pro as you want and not disturb someone else who wants to use less. So yeah, it'd be a great technology, and I'd be all for it. I'll be in my wheelchair, going, yeah, I wish I could have used that back in the day.
Yeah. I've sprayed a lot about climbing specific clothing from LIVSN, but now it's time for me to share something I am just as excited about. LIVSN's Highlands sweater is literally the most comfortable, warm, and stylish sweater I've ever worn. Think of it as a quilted fleece mid-layer, thoughtfully equipped with an elastic cinch waist cord, and my personal favorite feature, a zippered pocket on the side that keeps my wallet out of my pants. Plus, its Polar Air PowerTech fabric is engineered specifically to minimize the shedding of loose fiber fragments, improving its durability. I cannot get enough of this sweater, and I've already gifted it to several of my close friends. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can buy it, try it, and if you still don't like it, they'll just give you your money back. Right now, you can get 15% off your next Highlands sweater by using the link in the description below and using code TCM15 at checkout. That's the link in the description below and code TCM15 at checkout. And remember, every dollar spent at LIVSN is a dollar spent supporting this podcast. Back to this kind of like topic of the psychological aspect of climbing. We had touched on free soloing a little bit. How do you feel about the commercialization and the monetization that has come from publicizing free soloing? So like Alex Honnold just free soloed the Taiping, I don't know how it's called, Taiping 101, the tallest building in Taiwan, I believe. There's a lot of turmoil in the climbing community right now about what that actually means and the significance of it. And personally, I feel like, I respect him for making money. Like if I had that opportunity, it'd be really hard for me not to say yes to that. But at the same time, I feel like it does a disservice to the climbing community as a whole, because it's like glorifying this part of climbing that like doesn't resonate with a lot of us. And it gives the general population this sense of what climbing is that's not really true. And also like this climb was extremely rehearsed, and it's like the Elaine Robert, you've heard of him, right? Elaine Robert in Europe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's done way crazier first descent on-site free solos of way harder buildings and has gotten, next to zero in comparison to the recognition. Been arrested. And that's the thing too. Like Alex Honnold is being glorified for these buildings, and like anybody else that does it in the public gets arrested and charged. And like, so yeah. So talk to me about this part of the climbing community, the sport, because I feel like it's ultimately ingrained into the sport. It's something that's unavoidable. It's not Alex Honnold's fault. To me, it's a byproduct of how general population interacts with climbing. Like publicizing free soloing will always capture the attention of the general population, and that is going to always be able to be monetized, whether it's John Backer, Alex Honnold, whoever's next, whoever is going to fill the seat, there will be someone to fill that chair. Have you thought about that? Like, what was John Backer's influence on the client community back then, and how has that all kind of like culminated into this whole publicizing of free soloing?
Well, that's one thing I don't think I can blame on the manufacturers, because they're not selling any gear off Alex Honnold climbing. But yeah, I think the whole publicizing that just makes us look crazy. You're a climber. Oh, you do that Alex Honnold
You
stuff.
free climb?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
A couple of my kids and friends who don't climb texted me and said, "Are you going to watch that tonight?" And I said, "No, I don't watch live free soloing."
Yeah.
If I did watch the movie, and my hands were sweating the whole time. I'm like, this is just not enjoyable. I don't know what the point is, Yes, it was the most amazing athletic feat of the century, and I doubt it'll ever be repeated unless you
don't
have
think so?
spider glue.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Wow, that's a bold statement. So you think Alex Honnold is that much of an anomaly?
He's meticulous. You know, anybody can rehearse things over and over and over, but unless you have the mental focus to go with it, I just think it's a 1 in 100. I think somebody's going to try it, they're going to die, and that'll be the end of it.
So once there's a public failure in the attempt to live in Alex Honnold's shadow, it will kill the buzz that he's built around the publicity that he's built around free soloing.
Yeah, I just hate to see anyone try to repeat that, because I don't know. I think he beat the odds, and the next guy probably won't. So, but yeah, the whole publicizing free soloing just seems like it's, the Colosseum all over again. People want to see death.
For me, it's like, it's that kind of content is not for climbers. It's not made for climbers. It's made for people who don't know what climbing is, because the only way they're able to really connect with what they're watching is the fact that they can visualize the person falling to their death. And ultimately that's like what's keeping their attention, is like, maybe it'll happen. And that's kind of dark.
Yeah. But I remember also, I don't know, it's probably in the mid 80s, ABC World of Sports filmed, I don't remember who did it, climbing in Zion. There was a live climb, and it was over, I don't know, they'd cut in and out of it, but gosh, I can't remember who it was. He took a 40-footer onto a ledge and then backed off, well, probably fell 20 feet onto the ledge and flew off of it and went another 20. But, that's what the networks love. Is spectacles like that. And they're making lots of money off of it, and whoever they're filming is going to make some, maybe. But, yeah, just sensationalizing climbing like that, I think, detracts from the sport.
Yeah, I agree with that. I on my channel, I have this one video of me like climbing the rostrum, and my foot slips right after I place a cam, and I have a hand jam in, so like I slip, but I catch myself, but it's like I'm trying hard. It's overhanging. It's 11B. Like I'm really trying not to come off the wall, because it means I have to go back up and get through the crux. And so I scream. I'm just like, fuck, and then I get back up, get the hand jam, clip the rope, and then the video ends. But so it's got like 15 million views at this point, and I would say 90% of the people who have seen the video are non-climbers, and they are all commenting like, as if I was free soloing. They don't get it. They don't understand that there's a rope system in place. I have a safety system. Even in the video, I'm clipping the cam. It's like they still associate climbing with what Alex Honnold has sensationalized the sport for. And so when you get them coming across a video of some normal climber just climbing a route, trying hard, it's colored with this whole, ultimately, like from these people, hate and judgment and negativity. Like, this person has a husband, oh, just remember, guys, this person has a husband or a wife and kids, and he's out there risking his life. Or, I experience just as much risk eating a bag of Doritos on my couch. Like these comments of people just like so negatively averse to me allegedly like risking my life for nothing. Right. And it's like, I feel like that's the negative side of Alex Honnold's sensationalizing of free soloing and how it manifests into how climbing culture is viewed. It's like, we're not all lunatics. We're not all like out there to go kill ourselves and make our families sad that we died. And like, we're not all out there just like for self pleasure. Like 99% of us are calculated and risk management. And like, we're here to come back home. But that gets lost. And it's also, unfortunately, not that interesting to the general public. And so there's no money there. And so it's like, that's why I said it's almost this unavoidable part of climbing where you have this aspect of general population that's monetizable, and it will always be monetized because it's there.
Yeah. And even, Chris Sharma did that TV series and Deepwater Soloing. And I mean, it had actual normal people, but again, Deepwater Soloing, they're ropeless. They're climbing ropeless. So it still contributes to that public perception that, we're crazy. I'm not crazy. Just ask me.
Yeah. It's all deniable. I'm not crazy. They're crazy. Even my brother, he like reached out to me. He was like, sent me, it's because Alex Honnold's free solo is all over social media right now. It's like, I can't swipe away from it at this point. It's like one channel, it's the next channel, it's other channels repeating the channels. It's social media influencers talking about, it's everywhere. It's just saturated. But yeah, my brother reached out and he was like, this guy's crazy. And like, I was kind of like trying to ping him a little bit. I was like, well, it's not that crazy, talk to him all about the whole thing. And ultimately he's not a climber either. And he boiled it down to, it's like, I just can't understand why someone would risk their life for doing something like that. Is like, risk is built into our DNA as humans. We dig a coal mine, we build a railroad track, we risk death for the benefit of community, for the benefit of society. We take on risk as men to achieve something, but in climbing, it lacks that purpose, right? It lacks that reasonable understanding of why you're taking the risk in the first place. Because if you fall and die, you die, your family gets affected, everybody around you gets affected, and you left nothing behind for anybody except for your own ego on what you achieved, right? And so I think that is the biggest struggle for people to understand. It's like they're captivated by the risk, but they're also appalled by it because it's meaningless.
Yeah. Soloing needs to be done totally in private. I mean, I remember the story of Phil Croft, soloing Astroman, and nobody knew he was going to do it. Nobody knew he had done it, until afterwards. And he didn't make a big deal out of it. And he's done so much of that. And, he's in the same class with Honnold, but he does it privately, which I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like I said, I think it's unfortunately unavoidable. Okay, so you have been climbing for a really long time. How much of that has been with this passion of establishing first ascents?
I really don't have a passion of establishing first ascents. Okay. I like going to new areas. I'll spot something. Wow, that looks really cool, and go up and try it. And I've done first ascents that have never been reported, and I don't care to report them. You know, I can't remember enough about them now to ever report them, because, you know, when you climb, leave no trace, how are you going to know where the route went 20 years from now? So, you know, it's so much of it's just the joy of getting out there climbing. And the majority of stuff I've done was probably second ascents of things that, you know, others have done. And, but yeah, you know, I mentioned at the beginning this Wind Rivers trip that we took, and on the hike in from Dickinson Park to Cirque of the Towers, we passed this hanging valley on the left, and it had some amazing walls in it. And so several years later, I convinced my buddies to go in there. I said, why don't you go, let's go in and explore this area, because there was nothing on it, you know, nothing reported there. And so we managed to get across the river and hike up to this hanging valley and get over the top, and it's just a boulder field, maybe a half a mile long and a quarter of a mile wide, just nothing but boulders. We found one patch of grass that was big enough for a couple of tents, and that was it. And there was, you know, ice melt and pools of water in amongst the boulder fields, so we had water. And we just spent a week in there doing routes, and it was awesome. It was a great trip, and we named it Cirque of the Moon, which has been posted on Mountain Project now. But there was one classic route we did. It was a grade 5, and a few years later, I had climbed with Mike Head, the guy that discovered Waco tanks, lived in El Paso. He came back with a couple of friends a few years later and freed it, and you know, it's probably 11, solid 11, if not harder. He took a 40-footer on it, on the lead. And then I talked to a guy that had tried it last year, I guess, and took a 40-footer on that section. So he broke a pin, one of the original pins, just snapped it off. And so he had called me and said, do you mind if I put a bolt in there? I said, yeah, if the pin broke, go ahead and put a bolt in. So, but that's, yeah, that just doing that kind of thing, especially in a brand new area, you know, there's so much to do.
Now it seems like you weren't necessarily out there to like do first ascents for the purpose of like having the accolades of like, I did a first ascent. Here's the first ascent to the world. Like everybody can climb it now. It was more, at least I might be projecting here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you were almost like, this is just what climbing was. Like you go out there, you pick routes and you climb them, because there probably weren't as many established routes in the first place. And so it was almost easier to just point at something that inspired you and climb it, versus it was trying to find the blank canvas among all of the established routes that already exist.
Yeah, blank canvas, that's an interesting term, because, I mean, when I go into a new area, I don't see it as a blank canvas. I just see it as possibilities. You know, oh, look at that crack there. You know, that could certainly go, you know, and just visualizing stuff from the ground of what might be, and then turning that into reality. That's where the joy is. You know, it's not about, well, I'm going to put in 20 new wrap routes in this new area and, you know, and then make a guidebook, you know. It's just the adventure.
So you could have the same experience going up to the base of a route and climbing it ground up, thinking it's a first ascent and then coming back and realizing that it actually wasn't, it wouldn't matter because you still had that raw experience of something that was new and there was no information at least privy to you. And let's say the person didn't leave any hardware behind, and so there's no traces of another ascent. Like it's about the experience that a first ascent gives you rather than it's the accolade of it being a first ascent in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, last year I went up to do, a friend of mine said, I don't think there's any roots on the north face of the tombstone in the Sandias. Let's go up there and check it out. And we wrapped down it and looked it over and said, yeah, that should probably go. And so I ended up top roping up the thing, and we didn't place any bolts that day. So I got to talking to people, and Peter Prandoni, who was climbing before I was in Albuquerque, he said, oh, yeah, Doug and I put up a route there. And I said, yeah, I found a pin halfway up. So I knew somebody had been on it. So, yeah, that kind of thing, it didn't take any of the joy away, knowing somebody else had been up there. But it made me less inclined to put up a new route there. He had come in from a different way to get to that point where I found the pin. But, yeah, I didn't want to intrude on his route. So it's good to know if somebody's been on it before you go, especially adding stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're going to add stuff, at least do some research to find out if someone's been there, whether there's some history, whether someone's done first ascents, whether someone has spent time at the crag. Like it's definitely, I think that's one of the lessons, at least to carry on if someone's like interested in route developing, is like take some time to do the research and figure out like whether someone locally has been working there or establishing there. Like ask around in the community, you'll find out pretty quick.
Yeah, and you can't rely on Mountain Project. I mean, the original guide to the Sandias had that route listed, and it's out of print now, and only a few people have that still. So, it's hard, which just says, if you're going to do the route, try to do it as clean as possible and leave no trace, and then somebody else can have that same experience.
So you're 69 now. For someone who is looking to be in your shoes, like I watched you climb yesterday, and it was honestly just extremely impressive to see the ability to just try hard, push yourself. Like I aspire to be able to do what you did yesterday at your age. Like how have you gotten here? How have you achieved the ability to continue to try hard at your age? Is it luck? Is there any sort of preparation? Is there certain things you've done that has increased your longevity in the sport? What does that look like to you?
Like I said yesterday, never turned down a compliment. So I thank you.
No, I mean, honestly, like for sure impressive. Like I know there was some struggle there with the feet and stuff, but it didn't matter. Like even in the light of that challenge, there was still that tenacity, the focus, just the drive to continue. Cause you could easily just be like, anybody, any age could be in that position and just be like, fuck this, I'm bucking over it. I want to get out of here. So
Thank you. I've forgotten the question now.
just like so you're climbing at this level.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This age, like how have we gotten here?
Yeah. Number one, I think, well, I actually attribute a lot to taking judo as a young man and learning to fall and learning to protect yourself and how to roll out of it. That experience has helped me cycling, it's helped me rock climbing, but just a lot of it is just being blessed with good health my whole life. Being able to suffer a little or a lot, and just staying active, and like I said, I was probably the worst shape of my life when I was hang gliding, because you're just laying in a harness for hours on it, and there's not a whole lot of exercise other than carrying an 85-pound glider up a hill a couple of times. But yeah, after that, it was cycling kept me in shape for climbing. CrossFit kept me in shape. And so I push myself. I don't think I'm competitive. I'm really not competitive with others. I just like to go out and push myself as hard as I can and enjoy myself as a result of knowing that I've pushed myself. So it keeps things new, and going to new areas, climbing with new partners, mentoring young climbers with promise, and that sort of thing. It's been a joy, and God willing, I'll be able to climb another 10 years. It was a Fritz Weisner was pulling 5-10 overhangs in the gunks when he was in his 80s, I think. So,
Yeah.
So
There's people that's proven that it's true.
Hopefully that's
Jim
in my
Danini.
future. Yep.
Yeah.
Jim Danini.
Yeah. It's inspirational. What is the most proud climbing achievement you've done in the recent years, in the last 5 years?
I think it was probably 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Went to a new area in the Sandias I hadn't climbed before. There were several 511s there. 11s, I think the hardest one's 11C or so. And I was able to send 2 of the 3. I took a 40-footer on one of them, but then went back and sent it. So, that really told me that, man, you're climbing just as hard as you ever did back in your 20s. And it was really, really satisfying. I think I'm past that peak, though.
Yeah.
After yesterday, I'm well past that peak.
It was just the shoes, man.
It was that, and back injury and having not climbed much in the last year. So I was really in top form a couple of years ago. So
yeah, that's cool. It's nice to feel the attachment to the past in that way after having all that time pass. Still, it's just okay, we're still here in a way. Yeah, and I think that gives hope to people who aspire to do the same thing.
Sending Rock Warrior was probably right up there too.
Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago, but yeah, that was memorable.
Nice. I mean, honestly, in terms of what I had planned for us, we've covered most of it. Do you feel like we missed anything at all? Any stories or anything that you feel like you'd like to share while you're here?
There was the most memorable thing climbing was my near-death experience. I mean, I've had a few.
Tell me about this memorable experience.
Okay, well, it was semi-life changing, and so I did want to mention it. Yeah. I had done a route in the Sandias several times, and I went back with a friend to do it again. I'm trying to remember when exactly it was. It was probably in the late 80s. And I did it's normally a 4-pitch route. First pitches are, straightforward 5-9 dihedral, and then you get past the crux, and the rest of the way to the top is it's a hand crack up a lettuce lichen filled dihedral, and And then you do a little pace, and then you get behind this humongous block and chimney up or climb behind it. Easy climbing. And then normally belay because of rope drag, and then finish off the last 40 feet to the top or so. And on this occasion, since I had done it several times, I didn't want to belay behind the block this time. So I decided, it's easy enough. I'm just going to probably not protect it, and I'm going to go up and get to the top of the block and flip the rope around to the front so it's running straight down to the belay. And so I did that, and then I started climbing. It ends up on this knife edge ridge, and I do the last 40 feet, and I'm pulling on, stepping up the last couple of moves to the knife edge ridge, and I slip. And there's not a piece in between me and at least 100 feet to the belayer, and I blacked out. I knew I slipped, and I blacked out. And when I came to, I was hanging upside down from my knee wedged behind this flake. I had slipped maybe 3 feet. I mean, no fall involved. And so I was like, wow, that's fortunate. And so I pulled over and finished and got on top. Brought my partner up, told him what had happened. But, this is one of those acts of God things that, makes you think, I've either got the world's best guardian angel watching over me, or I'm meant for something else in this life. And so that, it didn't really change my climbing, but it gave me a new perspective on life itself and, what am I meant for here? And I wish I had the answer. But
What was it?
I don't have the
Oh,
answer.
you don't have the answer.
I don't. Yeah. I wish I did.
How long ago did this happen?
30 years, maybe 35, 40 years ago.
So it's interesting that you bring this up, actually. So when I talk to people who have close calls like this, near-death experiences, I've had plenty of my own, more than I can count, more than I'd like to admit. I've found that there are two types of people. There are people that chalk it up to chaos and luck. And then there are people who extract meaning from it. And what you just said, you're like, it means I'm here for some other purpose. That is exactly how I feel. That is exactly what I've extrapolated from my close calls. And I'm still in this stage of figuring out what it is that I'm here for, right? It's like, but at the same time, it gives me this passion to continue to push forward and to try to expand this podcast and to push myself as an individual and to continue to grow. It's been 30 years for you, and you still don't have an answer to that question. You don't feel like you've answered the reason why you're here.
I have suspicions, but I don't want to go into them.
Okay, that's fair.
At least not right now.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's, what makes it even more miraculous was that I repeated the route three or 4 years ago and couldn't find the flake.
What?
That my leg caught behind.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it'd been 30 years and rock falls happen and
Still.
freeze thaw.
Yeah.
But yeah, I looked and I'm like, where is that thing?
Wow. And it's interesting that you lost consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It's almost like in a video game where you save and reload in a way.
Am I in a different universe?
Fucked up that one. Yeah. Reload.
Yeah.
Try again.
But no, I chalk it up as just an outright miracle.
Wow.
And that the fact that I blacked out and means. There was another incident, near death, because I've got a few of them. There was another one where I slipped and it was descending a knife edge and drizzle, and I slipped on moss and went sliding down this slab on my back. But I was totally conscious the whole time. I knew at the bottom of this slab there was a small ledge about the size of this table, and I was either going to go off that way or off the cliff this way. But if I jumped that way, I'd be okay. And so I did that, and but it was all conscious. I'm just got to think fast and react to whatever I can do to save myself. But this other incident where, just blacking out, it was totally out of my control.
How much do you remember of the fall? It seems like you blacked out pretty instantly.
Yeah. All I remember is my foot slipping and I fell. That's all I remember.
And then all of a sudden you're hanging upside down with your knee wedged in a flake like 3 feet below where you just were. That is wild. That's wild.
So, yeah, that's
That's crazy.
It's unexplainable.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said it didn't affect your climbing that much afterward. I guess one of the topics we haven't really touched on is risk management. We've talked about psychological test pieces, and we've talked about the necessary aspect to climbing to, at least for you and I, to add depth and meaning to the experience. How do you draw that line between what's too risky and what's not? And has that risk assessment changed over the years for you?
It, I don't think it's really changed over the years. I have a very logical brain, and so I'm looking at, what's the risk of a fall? Is it low? Is it high? What's the risk of hitting something if I fall, or injury, or how far am I going to fall? That. But it also comes down to, do I think, I look at the moves and I say, do I think I can do these? And it's either a yes or a no, and if it's a no, I'm going to down climb as best I can to the last piece and back off. So that's kind of how I go about it.
So what you just described is exactly how I feel as well. How do you, as a climber, get better at making that judgment call? Knowing whether or not you can do it or not. Reading the rock and knowing what is required of you and knowing whether your skills are matched to what is asked of you to a certain degree of probability. To me, that's a skill. It's it's something that people have, or it's something people have or don't. Have you analyzed that at all with yourself? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just experience. How many of these situations have you been through before? Are the odds stacking up? Are they, against you at that point?
Do you have enough evidence to back up your judgment?
Yeah. And at my age, it's, I do not want to overemphasize. If I make an error, it's going to be in overconfidence. And so I don't want to, I am not climbing like I was. And so I don't want to be overconfident and get into trouble.
How has the degradation of performance affected your love for the sport?
Not really. Not really. I remember a good friend of mine, he quit climbing at 60 because he said it just takes too much work to stay in shape. Says I enjoy it, but the more I get out of shape, ate, was putting on a little weight, and, and that's, if I was pushing 200 pounds, I would not enjoy it like I still do. So I really work to keep my weight down so I can continue to enjoy it. But as long as, as long as I'm enjoying it, I'm going to keep climbing. I just got to watch the risk going forward here.
So like, I talked to Randy Levitt recently. We had spoken about this a little bit. Since he can no longer progress in the sport, he's lost interest. And he has then switched to surfing, where he's a newbie and he can feel that rush of progression in something new. What about climbing has captured your attention enough to not search novelty in other areas where progression might be a bit easier to attain? Whereas in climbing, as you continue to progress in this passion of climbing, ultimately, unfortunately, the progression is actually negative. It's digression. Like, you are going to see performance slip. You'll have to go back in the grade. You'll have to go back in risk tolerance. Like, what about climbing still is capturing your attention, even though these parts of the sport are starting to kind of like, the ball is shrinking in a way?
Yeah, I think the difference is competitiveness. When you're competitive with other people, and you start falling back in ability, that can really affect your motivation. And I've never really had that competitive spirit, that I mean, I admire it in people that have it. They just push themselves and do amazing things. But, it's been more about like you pointed out, the joy of movement, and whether it's 5'10" or 5'9" or 5'7". I mean, some of the most enjoyable climbs I've done were, 15 pitches of 5'7", because you're just moving, you feel fluid, you're in a tremendous place with awesome views, and it just doesn't get any better than that. And I can continue to, as long as I can hike in and just, to wherever it is. I'm not going to be carrying 100-pound packs anymore, but just the movement is going to keep it fresh for me.
Do you think that you'll lose the ability to approach faster than you'll lose the ability to climb vertical terrain?
Yeah. At least with the back problems I have now. So, but the approaches are, I'm getting slower. I don't like slowing my partners up, on the hikes in, but yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, you had mentioned like not feeling competition with others. What about, I'm not trying to like pressure you to answer in a certain way. I'm just trying to expand on this topic a little bit. Like, what about like a competition with the previous version of yourself, whether that's with performance or anything? Like, is there any sort of tension with like no longer being who you were in certain ways? Or is there like a level of acceptance of just like, this is how it is, and I'm able to experience flow in the mountains? It might look different, but the experience I'm having with this current body and who I am now is just, it's different but the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's a metric, just how I was climbing in my 20s, how I was climbing in my 50s, I'm climbing in my 60s. I keep thinking I've plateaued and I'm headed down, and then I'll be able to climb for several weekends in a row and pull off something hard. And I'll go, wow.
I'm not turning down yet.
Right. And then I'll go back, 2 months later and flail on it. So it's just, It's just a matter of inconsistency at this point, I think. Like yesterday, I felt like I was really on that downhill slide, but but I know I'll be getting back up, at least maybe not where I was, but better than yesterday,
Yeah,
for sure.
for sure. Yeah, I think that's key, right? It's like climbing is depending on what kind of climbing you're doing, it's ultimately so low impact that you can do it for a really long time. Yeah. You just pick the right routes, manage the risk, like don't take huge falls. You know, there's plenty of places with, you know, moderate to easy approaches where you still get great climbs. It's just like changing that lens, changing that focus, and still chasing that feeling of adventure and passion that climbing gives to us.
I might have to do more cracks. They're not my favorite, but I still love them.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah, again, I'm super grateful that you flew out here and to facilitate the experience we had yesterday and the conversation today. It's been rad, and I appreciate you.
Great experience. Thank you.
Yeah. If people are interested in like following your story in any way, is there a place they can go? Is there anything people can do to learn more about you?
Not really. I'm anti-social media. I don't have a Facebook page or Instagram or anything. But I am on Mountain Project, and people can hit me up there and send me a PM.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link your Mountain Project profile on there. You had said that you don't log your routes, or you haven't for the longest time.
I didn't until Mountain Project, and I've started logging them on Mountain Project.
Would you say, like, if someone is listening to this and is kind of in the beginning stages of their climbing and maybe not tracking their routes, like, would you encourage them to do so?
I would, because, as you start to lose your memory, you like to not lie to people about things. So
Yeah.
it's always good to be able to go back and refresh your memory.
Oh, wow. I climbed a lot.
Yeah. And, oh yeah, I did fall on that route. So I fell on it again. Yeah. So.